Have you ever wanted or needed a bag for multi-purpose use, or a bag that you don't need to worry about your important items such as your phone or laptop? Then Knack Bags are the bag for you. Knack Bags are your everyday bag for work, travel, and leisure. Knack Bags come with a fully padded interior to keep your electronics safe. With its sleek design, organized interior, and professional appearance, it looks great at work or on the street and expands for more capacity when you need it.
Get a Knack Bag today and stop worrying about how you look when carrying your life essentials. Use the code GAME, and for a limited time, get a free TSA-approved lock with purchase. Just add the TSA lock to your cart with your Knack Bag of choice and use the code GAME at the checkout to get it for free.
This is Game On, discussing the biggest games and all the latest sports news with Johnny Montalbano and Hank Indictor on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network.
It's go time, folks. Episode 4 of Game On, presented by Knack, here on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. I'm Johnny Montalbano, and now I'm on the left side of the screen. And that on the right side, there he is Mr. Hank Indictor, my new co-host here for Game On. Hank, welcome. How are you, bud?
Had last night.
Absolutely. It was an unbelievable NCAA tournament, all told. And at the end of the day, in the Final Four, we had 4 of the best teams actually still left, and then we ended up with a number 1 seed in the championship and a hot team in North Carolina. We get to all of that, but just a quick reminder, folks, you can make sure to follow us on social media. Game On here on Twitter at GameOnETB, also Facebook.com/Game On, and on Instagram, GameOn_ETB. And before we get things going here, I just want to introduce Hank to the show. Hank, I actually discovered from my old show, which I still contribute to, Review and Preview on the Review and Preview Network, and that is a great podcast network as well. So we have friends that contribute between both. And Hank, it's great to have you aboard. Hank, you could tell, is just like me. You know, when it comes to sports teams, we're not going to really disagree on much. So if you're looking for a little drama there, that's not going to be here. Hank's a Giant fan, a Yankee fan, and a Ranger fan like myself. So, Hank, how's it going? Thank you for coming and officially joining us, and how are you doing?
Oh my gosh, I'm doing pretty good. Thank you so much for bringing me on this network. Really, really excited to contribute. Really excited to bring a lot of good stuff to the table and start of what will be a great journey. And Johnny, I'm really, really excited to be working with you for the future. It's going to be awesome.
Absolutely. And Hank, you came aboard as we have a lot to discuss. Just like when I started this show, you know, we had no shortage of topics, and we do have that. You know, we've got a lot of baseball to discuss, whether it's the Yankees or the Mets or around the league. We will get to that. We'll even sprinkle in some football and even a little golf as, the Masters starts this weekend. And that's why you got so much great stuff to discuss here. And the big story, of course, with golf is will he or won't he regarding Tiger Woods playing. We will know, of course, by Thursday, and it sounds like it's going to be a tea time decision. So we'll get to all that. But Hank, we'll definitely tip things off here with some college basketball, the NCAA tournament. And I'll tell you, it started out crazy. We ended up with 4, well-known teams in the Final Four, whether it was Villanova, which was going for its 3rd championship in 10 years, Kansas, which was looking for their 2nd one in over a decade, and then, of course, the biggest rivalry in college basketball and one of the biggest rivalries in all sports, North Carolina Duke. But when you look at this Final Four, I picked North Carolina and Villanova, and I'll start real quick here with the Villanova and Kansas game since that was the first one on Saturday. And it really just came down to the fact that, Villanova, which was a great free throw shooting team, really never got to the line enough. They were banking a lot on threes. And it really was a sign of this whole entire tournament where we were seeing a lot of teams going from 3-point range, almost like the Stephen Curry days, where he really has transformed the game, not only of college basketball, but NBA as well. So when you look at that Villanova-Kansas game real quick, Hank, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I definitely thought Villanova was trying to force it too much with the 3 ball. They could have gone for those layups, but at the end of the day, I think you pretty much nailed it on the head. They really didn't get to the foul line enough, and ultimately, at the end of the day, Kansas was just dominant in that game from start to finish. Like you couldn't really stop them from hitting those shots. So to be fair, like it's not like the shooters are really at fault either way. You got at the end of the day, you got to give a credit to Kansas. They were the much better team, and I think we all pretty much knew that they were going to be in the finals at the very least. It was just a matter of who were they going to beat between Duke and UNC, which talk about that game. That was an insane ending. Amazing.
Yes. So when you real quick, yeah, I agree with you on that. And really the game was over in the first couple of minutes, Villanova and Kansas, because the Jayhawks jumped out to a 10-0 lead, and Villanova was playing catch up the entire night. It reminded me a lot of the Elite Eight matchup between the Tar Heels and St. Peter's, because the Tar Heels jumped out to a quick lead, and St. Peter's had to really play catch up the entire game, and that's what it looked like here. Kansas jumped out to a 10-0 lead, and Villanova was just playing catch up the entire night. And we've seen that a lot of times in the NBA too. You know, you jump out to a big lead and maintain the tempo, it's hard to come back from. Of course, that didn't happen in the championship, which we'll get to in just a moment, but it was good to see Kansas get back at it. And an interesting stat too, and I'll get to this as well, with the 2 number 1 seeds, not only in the NCAA tournament in the men's side, but on the women's side, where both teams that were the number 1 team were number 1 before the pandemic hit. And when that tournament got canceled, and they come back here as the number 1 seeds, and they end up winning the championship. But obviously the big deal also was with North Carolina and Duke. It was the first time that the bitter rivals had met in an NCAA tournament game, and it ends up being a Final Four matchup. And then you factor in that this is Coach K's last run at a championship, and Duke's trying for revenge after the Tar Heels spoiled Coach K's last home game at Cameron Indoor Stadium. And I tell you, Hank, I don't know if you heard my thoughts on this, but Duke to me was one of the most polarizing teams in the entire tournament, because they were a squad that I thought could make a very deep run, which they did, or they could have been a team that got knocked out in the second round. And I thought that was certainly possible. But at the same time, you look at the Tar Heels side of things, and they were a team that was playing some unbelievable basketball at the right time. They had got past Marquette, they got past Baylor, even though that they blew a 25-point lead in that game. One thing you saw with them was how dominant they could be scoring-wise, and they've had multiple great scorers on that team. So I was riding with a hot hand in picking the Tar Heels to make it past Duke, and you saw that again in that matchup.
Yeah, no, that was definitely incredible. Such a back-and-forth game, and who was the guy that drained that 3 again? Sorry, I'm not as familiar with college basketball as you are. What's his name?
Well, they've had Bacone make a big
Bacone.
shot. Yep.
That's who it was. When he drained that 3, I was like, I was like jumping up. Like, I didn't really have a legit dog in that fight. I mean, I was actually pulling more for UNC, but I'm like, wow, because like it was such a fun ride that team had. And granted, they were an 8th seed, and for them to get all the way and beat Coach K, that was pretty impressive. And it's funny, Coach K is getting a lot of the talk, but we got to give credit to Hubert Davis. First year after the retirement of Roy Williams, gets them all the way to the tournament, has a big lead. Unfortunately, we all know what happened in the second half of that game. Such an incredible story by the UNC Tar Heels.
Yeah, and like you said about Hubert Davis, I mean, I'm just looking at his basketball resume in North Carolina here. So he was a junior in '91 when UNC made the Final Four under Dean Smith. He holds the career 3-point percentage record at UNC with 43.5%. Of course, as you know, former Nick briefly, but still Nick nevertheless.
Yep, shot big free throws in the 94 conference semifinals against the Bulls.
Absolutely, yep. Second in the NBA career 3-point shot percentage. And obviously, he was a runner-up as an assistant in 16, the champion in 17. And then in his first year, like you said, this year, they get hot at the right time. They spoil Duke's last home game under Coach K, and then they spoil them again. So what he was able to do as an 8th seed, no less, and sometimes you have to get very fortunate. You get hot at the right time, and you don't usually see that in college basketball. A team that gets hot at the right time make a deep run, because it is such a weird tournament. but they were in a very favorable region. I had said that if there was one number one seed that I thought was very vulnerable in this tournament, it was Baylor, and that's what happened. Baylor had missed a few. We're down to like 3 guys in that matchup against the Tar Heels, and the Tar Heels had great scores. The thing that always scared me about North Carolina was their free throw shooting, and that's why I thought that teams like St. Peter's and Villanova had decent chances to make a run as well, because it ultimately comes down to making your free throws. And these kids, one thing it seems like they can't really do is make free throws. But no, I mean, you have to give the Tar Heels a lot of credit here as an 8th seed to get out of that and make it to a championship game. And then you look at the championship game itself last night against Kansas, and boy, I was riding the hot hand. And first half, they lead by 15. They actually had a 16-0 run at one point. It was amazing how this game changed so quick. It was 40-25 at halftime, and you're thinking, well, you've seen this story before with Kansas where they've overcome a big deficit. They did that against Miami, where they had a very poor first half and had an extremely dominant second half, and that happened again in this one. But it was amazing because it really happened so quick. In about a 10-minute span in the second half, Kansas went from down 15 to up 5, and then they never looked back.
Yeah, Kansas, what an incredible comeback. That team, I think a lot of people had that team winning the finals too, and really incredible roster, amazing comeback. And you got to fault UNC too a little bit, because there were times where I thought they tried to get too aggressive with the 3-point shots, and there were also some moments where they could have had those layups. But that being said, Kansas took advantage of UNC as they got cold, and you have to give them credit where credit is due.
And a little bit of a vindication for Kansas, because if you look at before the pandemic hit in 2020, they were a number 1 team. And even on the women's side, the South Carolina Gamecocks, they were a number 1 team before the 2020 pandemic. And obviously we know what happened with the tournament getting canceled that year and then being in a bubble last year. And then they come back, and this year, when we had it looked like a normal tournament for the first time in a few years, and Kansas and South Carolina both end up winning the championship. So a delayed but not denied kind of championship for both Kansas and even on the women's side, South Carolina. And I don't know if you saw any of that women's final, but that matchup between UConn and South Carolina, probably 2 of the most storied franchises in women's college basketball, was crazy too. So really, this tournament was madness from start to finish, and ends up being on the men's side between North Carolina and Kansas, 2 storied franchises. So really, at the end of the day, what we really got was a number 1 team that did win. Maybe not the one that we thought, because a lot of us, including myself, had Gonzaga and Arizona playing for the championship. But you end up with a very, very exciting and dramatic and memorable Elite 8 and the Final 4 and national champion. And now we'll see, these seniors going to the NBA will be focusing a lot on that. And then you start wondering, what the future of college basketball is. And that's where we'll make a nice transition here into talking about Coach K, Hank. And, because that's really the biggest thing that also came out of this tournament was Coach Mike Krzyzewski's last run at this. And, short term, and I did a Monty moment about this a couple of days ago. Really the short-term discussion is going to be his first career loss as Duke coach to North Carolina, and his last 2 losses both being to the Tar Heels. And yeah, that's going to sting a little bit. And yes, the Tar Heels will have, that to brag on for years and years to come. But when you look at the career of Coach K, I mean, this is one that was, in my opinion, nothing short of legendary, because not only to do this with one team, but to do this for as long as he did. I mean, we're going back 3 decades. I mean, he was making Final Fours with Duke in the 80s. We know about his 2 championships in 91 and 92, and just the level of consistency, which, maybe in college sports might be a little bit more favorable to do, but nevertheless, you have so many other teams to deal with. And, you have players that go in and out almost every year because they either transfer or they go pro. So I look at it long term, and I'm looking at something that we may never see again in not only in college sports, but in sports in general regarding Coach K. And that was just a level of consistency, of success for really over 3 decades.
Yeah, it's amazing. 1,100. I'm looking at his record right now. 1,129 and 309 win-loss record. His worst season with Duke was only in like his second or third year, and since then I don't think he had another losing season again.
Yeah, the first couple
That's
of years
impressive.
were a little difficult, but then when you look at the fact that, in the 80s, in the mid to late 80s, he makes the Final Four. And, it's so difficult. I mean, I even said this too when doing the research. He lost 8 Final Four games, and you look at that real quick, and that may sound like a bad stat, but it does also lead to the success that he had in, making the Final Four all those years, whether it was 86, 88, 89, 90. I mean, make the Final Four 4 out of 5 years. You may not see that in today's day and age with all.
You had a good tenure.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the championship.
Not to mention, he helped turn the program of Duke around. So, if you think about what they were kind of not like one of the first schools you thought of before the 80s when it came to college basketball. I think back then it was really UCLA with John Wooden.
Yep.
Once Coach K got there, he transformed the whole program. So to me, it doesn't really matter that he lost a good amount of the Final Fours. The fact that he got to the dance a lot of the time meant that that's a symbol of how consistent that he made their basketball program. And by the way, you want to hear another fun fact about Coach K? He's the only coach to lead his team to a Final Four in 5 consecutive decades. I think I actually used that fun fact on Review and Preview.
Yep, absolutely. That's true because it goes, let's see, 80s, 90s, and then obviously we know 2000 for sure, the 2010s, absolutely, and then now obviously here in 2022. So, like I said, it's a remarkable ride, and really one that, as the time goes on, we'll realize more and more about how legendary this run was from him. And like I said, it's not like the pro sports when you can have big time players stay for, say, even 7, 8, 9, 10 years. These are guys that play at most your big time players 4 years at most, and a lot of them play less than that because they could be one and done, or they go in after their second or third year, they turn pro, or they go into this transfer portal, or they just decide to move on from playing competitive sports. So it's about recruiting as well. We've seen that obviously in college sports in general, the whole recruiting process, but that's what it just speaks to the fact it's truly a remarkable ride, and it could be, kind of disappointing the way it ended, but overall, I mean, this is a career that, you think about it, the guys that are right now, the current college coaches that are out there, whether it's, Bill Self now in Kansas, who's done this, or now Jay Wright in Villanova. Jay Wright, we were talking about him winning his 3rd title in 10 years. And I know he's been Villanova coach for, I think it's like 18 or 19 years or so. But just the current guys that are out there right now, and what they would have to do to even be partial to what.
Actually, Wright's been there for 20 years.
Is it 20? Yeah. And he was going for his 3rd title in 10. But I mean, other than that, I mean, you look at all these other guys, and to be with one program for 4 or 5 decades, like you'd said, it's amazing, because we don't see that obviously in the pros at all. In college, I mean, even in college football, you don't see coaches survive that long. So basketball, it's amazing. It truly is. I mean, this is something I will go out on record and say we will never see a level of success like this from one coach for one team. And that's the other thing too. One team. I mean, you could have success like this in doing multiple teams, but to do it for one squad, legendary, historic, something we'll never see again.
Yeah, it's amazing. And to really give you an idea of how big of a coach he was, as I've told you, I'm not the biggest college basketball fan, but every time I hear March Madness, I never would, since I really figured out it existed, I'd never heard March Madness without first hearing the name Coach K. So that tells you something. And I think really the first finals that I can remember, it wouldn't have been the late 2000s. I remember that epic Butler Duke game where he won. That was his second to last title. One of the best games in NCAA men's basketball history, by the way. And yeah, That's really I gotta say. Such an amazing coach.
I remember. I mean, I was an infant at the time, but they've showed the highlights so many times, and I've seen it historically. And that Duke overtime game against Kentucky when Leitner hits that shot, which is one of the most iconic moments in really all of sports. How that ended, that was it too. But you look at his resume too. I mean, you mentioned some of the numbers too, but he's a 5-time national champion, a 3-time Olympic gold medalist. He owns the most wins in NCAA history and the most tournament wins in men's NCAA history. So he's got some stats here that to do it with one team, I mean, this is never going to happen again. I mean, I will go out on the record and say that. You may see a 5-time champion with one coach, but it may be with multiple schools. So I think what we really saw was the end of a legendary era. And yes, short term, like I've said, it's going to, they'll be thinking about the 2 losses. Obviously, we know what the Tar Heels are going to be thinking. Oh, we gave him his first loss as Duke head coach and his last 2. But at the same time, the consistent level of success and winning and all that stuff. And like you said, I think you made a great point too. When you think of March Madness, one of the first things, if not the first thing you think about is Coach K. So it's definitely going to be a different kind of era over there at Duke. And now we'll see, with this new guy that the assistant that they had for a couple of years, they already announced was going to be their head coach in the future. And, he'll have a lot of pressure on his hands because people are going to expect, you can't expect instant results, but, you think of Duke basketball and you think about consistency and a level of winning. So it definitely is going to be a different kind of era over there at Cameron Indoor Stadium starting next season.
Actually, I somewhat take back what I said because there's really only one other college coach that I could put on the same level as Coach K for like most dominant in my lifetime. And that's a women's basketball coach. That's Pat Summitt, but that's a tangent for another day.
Well, I would say Pat Summitt. I would think even Gino Auriemma over there at UConn. We were talking about the women's championship real quick, where between UConn and South Carolina, and Gino was 11-0 in the title game before this loss to South Carolina. So he was 11-0 in championship games. The level, and that's another thing too. The level of consistency and winning over there at UConn these last, I'd say at least 20 years. Because I remember going back to, not that I'm a diehard women's college basketball fan, but I will watch it in the big games, and I do notice it more down here in South Carolina with the Gamecocks. And what Dawn Staley's been able to do with that team. They've got a player in Aaliyah Boston who has been unbelievable. But
she's fantastic.
Yeah. But I think, UConn, this Paige Beckers that they have at UConn is an unbelievable player too. And, I go back to when Diana Taurasi was there and what she was able to do. And that was, I think, like 2004. So we're talking almost 20 years of success over there at UConn. And this year was actually one of their more challenging years because they had a lot of injuries too, and to still make it to the final was actually quite a ride. But yeah, that really could be the only other 2 coaches I would think about would be Pat Summitt, like you said, over there at Tennessee, and then Gino right now at UConn. That could be it. But definitely will create some interesting things going into next season in college basketball now that we don't have that. And now you've got Hubert Davis, who in just his first year led North Carolina to a runner-up finish for the national championship. And, but what it might do also is it's going to create a lot of pressure on first-year coaches. And that could be what we're talking about with Duke next season now, especially with this new guy coming in, replacing legendary Coach K, is it could definitely create a new level of pressure for him because they saw what Hubert did over there at North Carolina.
Yeah, no, that's going to be, it's really tough to do in your first year. So it'll be interesting to see what the new guy for Duke does. I feel bad for him actually too, because he's going to come there his first year. He's going to have some Shaq-sized shoe to fill, as I would describe it. So,
well, I've always said that the Duke Carolina rivalry, you could take the worst players in the world. They could both be 1-20 playing each other and it would still be epic. Well, now it's going to be epic because you don't have a Coach K there and you now have got Hubert Davis over there. So you got 2 different coaches, and the level of success that North Carolina had this year with their first year and knocking out Duke giving Coach K's last 2 losses, it might actually create even a crazier drama with those two playing next season, and we must see TV on both of them. So we'll see how that goes. But congratulations to Kansas for winning the championship, because I know they were a 1 seed, but I did not think they were championship contenders. But they proved me wrong. I mean, as did a lot of things. I don't know if you saw, I had about 5 copies of my bracket, and I ripped them up. I mean, not only were they, busted, they were absolutely destroyed. I mean, I guess I could take solace in that I had Carolina going pretty far, and that might have been the only thing they got right. Other than that, I was way off. But that's the fun thing about this tournament. Single elimination, anything's possible, and we saw that. And so we will see what the future holds there. But switching gears, Hank, let's dive into a little baseball. Opening day just 2 days away, and I'll be honest with you, I hate to say this, I'm starting to get a little excited. And I know I sound like I should be doing that, but look, it's still opening day. The opening day that I wasn't really thrilled for was the one 2 years ago in the shortened pandemic year. But this is pretty much a normal season, which we really didn't think we were going to have this year. But this is definitely going to be an exciting one, and we'll get to the on the field stuff in a little bit. But Hank, you and I are both Yankee fans, and we have to talk about this big deal that happened in the past week with both Brian Cashman and Carlos Beltran commenting about the 2017 Astros. And this really came out of nowhere with both of them, because the Cashman was interviewed by The Athletic this past week. And Hank, I know what you're thinking, but what's you think when you heard Cashman's thoughts about the 17 Astros?
Well, my first thought is, first of all, why didn't you just go out and get Justin Verlander when you could have? Maybe that could have been avoided. Second of all, it was 5 years ago. You didn't score a single run at Minute Maid Park. You can't score, you can't win, no matter what kind of cheating they're doing. So, you got to get over it, man. 5 years ago, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, you know what? I think Cashman was almost trying to speak to the fan a little bit, and because the fan is still looking at that, and not even just because they lost. I mean, not even because they lost the Astros, but just that whole thing. And I think it almost ties into Manfred's job as commissioner and how poor of a job. And I've said he's done a lot of terrible things. I mean, there's no doubting that. But the worst thing that he did or didn't do was punish the Astros for that 2017 championship. But yeah, I get what you're saying about it being 5 years ago. And yes, the thing I have is the Yankee team itself. Now, I think that's actually been one of the best teams the Yankees have had in these recent years, was that definitely. 17 team, because there was really not a lot of expectation. You had baby bombers. It was Judge's rookie year where he hits the 50 home runs.
That was one of my favorite seasons, actually.
I agree, and I think it's one of the best years they've had in this last – I almost would say it's been their best team since the last World Series in 2009, because of the expectation factor, because of the different players that they had. They didn't really – have a bona fide superstar like we thought they would go out and get. I mean, that would be the next year when they would trade for Stanton. But yeah, so in some sense, I guess Cashman was almost trying to speak to the fan, maybe 5 years too late. But at the same time, I agree with you. That you look at that series, the Yankees only scored 4 runs down there at the end, and that ended up really being a problem too. So Cashman was
forget the 4 runs in the 4 games in Houston. The last 2 games at that ballpark, I think they scored like even less than that. And they had a chance to put them away one of those 2 games.
Yes, that is absolutely true, for sure. And so I see kind of where Cashman was almost like trying to speak to the fan. But, now the frustration has been building in, because now this has been 13 years now since their last World Series, and it's not like that's the closest they've really been at that, and really the short season in 2020 when they were taking on the Rays.
2019 was a pretty good squad, though.
It was. I think, though, the thing was, when you go out and get Stanton, it builds that much more pressure on them. That was a team that really didn't. I mean, they were getting contributions from Judge, like we said, who was the baby bomber at the time.
Well, that was the team that had a lot of injuries, but then so many guys contributed during the regular season. They won like 100+ games. And then you had that series against the Astros where they won the first game. The second game, Judge hit that big home run, but then I think it was Adam Ottavino who gave up the tying home run. They end up losing that extra inning game. That was the turning point of that series.
Yeah, and the Yankee fan almost starting to get very impatient with Cashman as you look going into this year, and it almost transit. And then you look at Beltran's comments, and I thought, Beltran, who now a new analyst with the Yes Network, I thought this was very interesting. His first comments about the Astros. I thought it would have been interesting because the first when I heard those comments and when I read the comments because they leaked out before the interview actually aired on the Yes Network on Monday. When I heard those comments, I almost thought to myself, if he had said that when he was interviewing to be the Met manager, I almost wonder if he would not have been fired, he would have stayed Met manager.
Oh my!
And not been punished in that regard. Because if he came out and was honest about that, I wonder if he still would have been Met manager when that happened. But I thought it was interesting because the first time he actually says something like that is when he's an analyst for the Yankees. So I thought that was quite amazing. But now you look at Beltran's comments, and the thing though too is so when I think of both of these saying it within just a few days of each other, it still just makes me more frustrated that nothing happened to the Astros in 17. Now that's also not to say either. There's another angle to this. That's not to say that would have prevented the Yankees from winning that series, and then they would have gone on to play the Dodgers in the World Series. And we don't even know if they would have beat the Dodgers in that series. And
no, the Dodgers were so good. I really don't know about that.
Yeah. And you look at the way the Dodgers have built their teams. They've built their teams the way the Yankees.
That was a 105 win team too. I don't know how you can assume the Yankees would have won that World Series.
It would have been very unlikely, let's just say.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it just when I look at that, it's frustrating because I get what they're saying, but at the same time, it's been 5 years later, and it just frustrates me more that nothing was done from Manfred. If we had any other commissioner, Adam Silver kind of commissioner would have punished the Astros. Now, granted, it's a different sport and it's a different situation because nobody likes Manfred and the players are all behind Silver. So we do know that. But if you had a gutsier commissioner, I'm sure something would have happened to the Astros. But that's what makes it frustrating is that it harkens back to those days. And yes, we should move on. Something should have happened to the Astros. Yes, we know that. But it just also makes you frustrated nothing did happen to them.
I mean, look, I'm going to play devil's advocate and say he probably wanted the whole scandal to just go away. But at the same time, I agree with you. There more action should have been done than just giving them like a slap on the wrist, because what the Astros did is worse than like any player using steroids. You literally used a systematic and like crazy way of cheating to go on during the game where like you had stuff in your own team's scoreboard, you had trash cans banging, like, and if you really look at those clips of those games, it was pretty obvious something was going on. So yeah, that's where I agree with you.
And the thing is, there's cheating still happening in baseball. I don't buy for a second this is stopping anybody from doing it. I'm there. Look, one thing, you can change the drug suspensions, you can change the list of drugs and the list of ways you can stop cheating. And one thing you're going to find with baseball players and managers or any front office people or anybody in baseball, they're going to find a way. They're going to find a way to get around all this stuff. They've done this all the time. If you ban a certain drug, they'll find another drug. They'll experiment all this stuff. But the fact that nothing was done and that you basically told the Astros go out and do it again, that's pretty much what you'd say. And you'd say it to any team: go out and do it because we're not going to punish you. I think the drug suspensions aren't strict enough. I still don't think they're strict enough. But it's just, and it's also, this gets magnified some more because of all the problems that Rob Manfred has done to the game, and they're still leaking over into this year, and they're going to be leaking into 2023 with all these new rule changes that I don't think benefit the game at all. So, you finally saw one good thing they did in that, and you even saw it for the first time last night, is the umpires are going to be announcing what happens after an instant replay. That's something that we've been harking for years. So maybe there's one positive, but there's so many things wrong with the sport. And then it just brings it back to this day in 2017. And it still frustrates the heck out of you. And yeah, I agree with you. We do have to move on eventually. We've got a season coming up in 2 days, but Cashman and Beltran's comments, I kind of get where they're coming from, but at the same time, Brian Cashman, who's under a tremendous amount of pressure. I mean, Cashman could be one of those guys that gets like a lifetime pass as the GM and stuff. But sooner or later, look, even Joe Girardi, who was the Yankee manager for a decade, even he didn't last forever. Joe Torre, these periods only last for so long. And I don't think it's crazy to think now with this AL East and this AL in general, which has gotten a lot better and a lot more competitive, that it puts a ton of pressure on Cashman and the Yankees to actually do something this year. Now, do I think the Yankees are a playoff team? I do. I also think, though, and Hank, you and I have discussed this too, I think this team is very poorly constructed. I think that if they can get production and good production from Gleyber Torres and Aaron Hicks, those could be the two wild cards in all this. Because if they get production from those two guys, it makes the lineup and it makes this roster a lot better. But you're banking on a lot of ifs: health, bounce back years, and really Aaron Judge. What's he going to give you? Because he could be gone after this year if they don't. I don't think they're going to reach an extension by opening day, and if that's the case, then they're not going to talk till the end of the season. And I almost wonder if the Yanks, with the money situation, and there is a money situation with them, are going to bring him back. So they've got a lot of ifs going into this season, and puts a lot of pressure on Brian Cashman.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I pretty much said before the season, did the Yankees necessarily get better? No, but I don't necessarily think they got worse either. I mean, I actually think they're a better fielding team, at least infield wise, than they were last year. But at the same time, am I impressed with the way they're constructed? Absolutely not. And yeah, like you said, I think they're banking on a lot of things to go their way. I mean, pitching wise, obviously you still have Garrett Cole locked in as your ace. There's going to be pressure on him because look what happened in the wild card game in Boston. The guy gets like shellacked in like the third or fourth inning, and the way he got out of that game, that did not sit too well with me. It wasn't like Aaron Boone just said, "Oh, you're done." He straight up told Aaron Boone, "I'm done." Gave him the ball and stormed back into the dugout. That did not sit well with me at all, especially if you're a pitcher getting paid as much money as he is. And then you look after him. There's Luis Severino, who has been dealing with a lot of injury issues the past 2-3 years. If he stays healthy and he contributes, that could help them too. But again, much like what you said with Aaron Hicks and Gleyber Torres, those are all big, big ifs. And again, it's essentially the health with these guys is essentially a mystery box. Can Jordan Montgomery bounce back? Can Jameson Taillon have a good season after his first year last year? And this is another guy who dealt with a lot of injuries, 2 Tommy John surgeries. Like, It's hard for me to really look at the Yankees and feel optimistic that should they make the playoffs, which I think they will, they're going to make some noise. It's not a great baseball team, or not a great, not the best constructed baseball team.
They're not the best constructed team, and they're also are dealing with a division that got a lot better, whether it's the Blue Jays, the Red Sox, who got Trevor Story and have a very good lineup, and even the Rays. You know what? The Rays are always pesky, and they always seem to find a way. So they're going to give them fits, and I'll say this. The Orioles were the one team that you could bank on beating. The Yankees went 11-8 against them last season. That really, if besides the fact that they had production issues from pretty much everybody in that lineup outside of Judge and Stanton, you can point to that one thing, the fact that the Yankees went 11-8 against the Orioles, as the reason why they were playing in that wild card game against Boston. Tampa went 18-1, and the Yanks went 11-8. I mean, that's what it comes down to. I mean, you got to beat up on your opponents when you can. I mean, the Yanks a few years ago beat up on Baltimore like it was nothing. And last year they were, I hate to say, they were having fits against them. And so what you're going to really be banking on with this team too is health-wise, which is still a concern because, Stanton always hurt. Josh Donaldson's 36. He's had one full season in the last 7 years or so. I think I like left foot short. I'm thinking Torres is going to have a nice bounce back year because if you're going to put him at second base, position that he's a lot more comfortable in, he's going to have a big year. And Aaron Hicks, to me, too, also is a big player on this team because let's say that, he has another injury problem. Who are you putting in center field? You're going to put Judge back in center. You're going to move Gallo to center. You're going to probably have to play Stanton a lot more in the outfield than you really want to. So, and really, I think the best hitter on the Yankees right now does not have a position. He's going to be, and that's LeMahieu. That's the real crazy thing. He doesn't have a position right now because they want to put Torres at second. Donaldson's got third. Rizzo's got first. So where is LeMahieu going to fit into all this? He's going to play a full season, but where is he going to be? And hopefully he's healthy because I think that hip issue affected him, just like I think the hamstring affected Cole down the stretch and into that wild card game. And catcher-wise, I mean, let's be honest, as much as Yankee fans don't like Gary Sanchez, Royvert's hurt. They've got Higashioka and they've got Jose Trevino, who they got from the Rangers at catcher. So, you're going to take a hit behind the plate, maybe not defensively, but offensively. So you're banking a lot of ifs. And I know we're going to talk about this on our special preview show coming out tomorrow. I think the Yanks are a playoff team, but I don't know how far of a team they are. I think they're going to be like they were in years past. Well, they do have a lot of question marks this year, but I think they're going to get into the playoffs. They'll be right in the regular season, but then come playoff time, I don't know how well this roster is to make another run at the playoffs. That's the thing. And I will also say, though, too, this roster right now will not be the same roster that'll be there in August, September, and hopefully into October.
It almost never really is. It
Right.
almost never is.
Well, look, they're going to get another starting pitcher. Now,
Yes.
I would have liked Manaea. Obviously, he went to San Diego. I'd even go out there and get the other guy, Montez. But they're going to have to get another starting pitcher because right now their number 2 starter is Severino. Like you said, this is now 2 years removed from an injury. Montgomery, you really don't know what you're going to get out of him. Tyone, like you said, he was hurt at the end of last year. He actually made some pretty quick progress, all things told, following that ankle injury. But a lot of ifs with them. But if they put it all together, they're probably talking about a 90-plus win team, which is good enough to make into the postseason.
Yep. But then the other thing that will concern me is them hitting with runners in scoring position. How many times have I watched a game this year where they're down like 4-0, they'll score a few, but then they'll have the bases loaded, no outs. It's like the top of the 7th or 8th inning, and then it's either pop-up, 2 pop-ups and a strikeout, or strikeout, pop-out, strikeout.
Well, that's why I didn't like the Donaldson trade, because I feel like he's more of a contact kind of hitter on the team, and maybe Falefa could be that guy. Maybe Torres can bounce back and be that guy. But, he brought in another power-hitting veteran right-handed bat, which they did not need when you already have Judge and Stanton. And, I mean, maybe you wanted to say you maybe traded Donaldson for Sanchez in that regard. Okay, but, Donaldson also is a guy that gets hurt a lot too, and he's 36 years old. So, if
he can be healthy, he can probably do some damage with that Yankee lineup. But as I said, you notice the key words that I said.
If he's healthy, I'll sign up for 130 games from him right now if I can get that at third base. I mean, I know he played 135 last year, but other than that, I mean, you have to go back like 6-7 years since his last full season. So, and I miss Urshela. I miss his defense. I miss his contact bat. That's the thing. They don't have a lot of contact bats on this team. One of the few ones they have right now. If opening day is today, and you look at the way the roster is constructed, that guy's not in the lineup right now. They're going to find him a spot, but where's that going to be? What you're going to do is you probably put him at second. You're going to move Torres back to short, and then you're going to be bracing yourself. Now, at the same time, Rizzo could save you in that regard because he's a very good defensive first baseman too.
Yes.
But a lot of ifs, a lot of concern, and it'll be interesting. Now, hopefully we'll have an opening day for them on Thursday because the weather doesn't seem to be favorable for Thursday. I know, Hank, you're going to the game, but and we'll obviously talk a lot about that next week too. But
that would stink because Friday is when Hitting for the Cycle comes back, and I don't know if I could go if it's not.
Well, I don't think they would move it directly to Friday and play a doubleheader. Or they?
Well, no. Friday's a scheduled off day. They always have an extra day off.
Have an off day, yeah. You know what? That's another thing too. I know they've done this recently, but the opening day on a Thursday is just so strange too. I'm used to the way back when they used to have this one Sunday night game and then they open up on Monday.
I remember that. That was good old days.
But we'll definitely talk a lot more about this on our preview show tomorrow. But let me get to the Mets here real quick too, Hank, because the big deal with the Mets obviously is Jacob deGrom is injured again, and this time this is weird because I remember there was talk about him having shoulder issue, and then he was going for an MRI, and so you're already bracing yourself. And then I remember the day that announcement came, you were waiting 4, 5, 6 hours, and the longer it was going, the more you probably knew that it was going to be a problem. And then he has something where it's like a stress reaction in his scapula. That's just something I've never heard about. Now, I've listened to the radio a lot, and I've heard that, this is probably an injury that NFL quarterbacks have had, probably even before, they've had these MRI machines. So it could be something they've had years past. I heard there were doctors that ended up calling stations, and they were saying that really, it's not surgical, but the thing you have to do is you need to rest it. So they were saying 4 weeks for deGrom with this before he gets reevaluated. And then that's just before he gets reevaluated. So then if he gets the all clear in 4 weeks, which, is a big if, we don't know if 4 weeks he actually is going to be cleared by then he's got to ramp up his starting program again. So right now, the way things are looking, I don't think you're getting Jacob deGrom back before June at the earliest. I was saying you'd sign up for Memorial Day. I don't even know if that's realistic right now. But maybe the Mets do have the depth in the rotation to survive short term, maybe not long term. Whether it's bringing in Scherzer, I know he's dealing with a minor hamstring issue, but you've got Scherzer, you've got Bassett, you've got Walker, Carrasco. Remember, Carrasco was like your third starter last year. Now he's your fifth starter. You've got Peterson that you could use. They've got McGill. So the Mets do have depth in the rotation, but this is a big blow, and this is something that's going to be very interesting because the talk with deGrom also, Hank, was that he was going to opt out after the season. And I will say this: if Jacob deGrom is going to opt out at the end of this season, then if you're the Mets, you cannot sign him back. And I get how great he's been. Listen, there's no doubt about that. But deGrom's 34. And I'm sure without admitting it, he's looking at Max Scherzer, who's 37 and making $43 million this year. You cannot sign him. You cannot give him $45 million to be back on this team next year. I don't care if it's just for 1 year. deGrom is 34. It's unfortunate. Him, just like Judge, they both came up at a late age. But he's a starting pitcher, and he now cannot stay healthy. It's shown. He's having one problem after the other. He's breaking down at this point. And the thing is, he may have to change the way he pitches to avoid getting his injuries. And if that's the case, you're going to talk about him throwing, 95 now? You take a few miles an hour off that fastball, major league hitters will explode on that. He's going to have to become another kind of pitcher, and we don't know if he could have that kind of success being a different kind of pitcher.
Yeah, no, I agree. And age 33, 34, that's around the time that most of these pitchers start to fall off and they start to have a decline. So if the Mets are even considering trying to sign him, then they better think twice. Because look what's happened to a lot of these pitchers at that age.
Yeah.
And not to mention, you're already paying, as you said, you're paying Max Scherzer a lot of money as we speak. No, you can't take that risk with deGrom.
I do see now. The thing is, I don't think money is really a factor in this regard. I'm almost warning more about just the fact that, you're going to have this guy on the team and he's going to be missing a bulk of the time now. We're already talking to him. We're looking at 2 months here at the earliest because it's 4 weeks before he gets cleared. And what if he's not cleared? Then we're talking about even longer. And then he's got to start his throwing program again. And that's going to take a month. So this is a problem that you're going to have. And I like the fact that, they were talking about this deal with the Padres where they were going to get Hosmer and this pitcher, Chris Paddock, who Met fans, we know the discussion with him and Alonso from a few years ago when they were rookies, the debate they had there and the rivalry in that regard. Yep. And Emilio Pagan, who's not a bad reliever. And I like the fact that, the optics of that were, the Mets were not going to, be disappointed just stop from deGrom. They were going to go out and get another pitcher for depth. But that trade to me made no sense. And I like the fact that it fell through because you put Eric Hosmer on this team, then you're going to DH Alonso. Alonso, I mean, he's the kind of guy that wants to play every day. He wants to be in the field every day. So bringing in a Hosmer in that regard, his numbers went down last year, and he still owed a lot of money. And I know the Padres were going to take on a good chunk of that deal, but I didn't like that, and I didn't like the Chris Paddock. Wouldn't have liked the Chris Paddock move because his numbers have gotten worse over the last couple of years. Look, if you're the Mets and you want to go out there and get a big pitcher to either fill in deGrom or extend that rotation, go all the way. Go to Oakland and get Montez. I was saying, look, when I looked at that deal, I was like, if we're going to go ahead and get another pitcher, let's go the whole mile here. Why am I going for Paddock, who's had a 5-year ERA? His numbers have only gotten worse since his rookie year. Instead of getting somebody like a Montez who's been very good and somebody can get now, they'll get another pitcher. I'm sure they're going to add to this rotation and they're going to make more moves. I think them, like the Yankees, this roster that's constructed right now is not going to be the same team that's competing in August and September. But I'm kind of glad. I am glad that trade fell through because to me that trade made no sense to bring in a starting pitcher whose ERA was 5, and that's in the NL West, which is not really known for their offense outside of the Dodgers and maybe if you're playing at Coors Field in Colorado. I'm kind of glad that move that did not happen. But you'll see them making another move because I think Dominic Smith's going to be off this roster. I mean, Dominic Smith's a guy who can play every day, but he just doesn't have a spot on this team because first base obviously is occupied. Left field, I still don't really think he's a great left fielder. I mean, he could DH, but your DH spot is clogged up too. So all that stuff, I think the Mets are all right now without that. And I think short term they'll be all right, but there's still a lot of question marks with them this season.
Yeah, no, for sure. Again, there's a reason why I think you and I both did not jump on the Mets hype train when they got Max Scherzer. I think a lot of people besides us haven't really jumped on the Mets hype train, but we'll see how it goes. I think definitely, like you said, their pitching depth can carry them maybe for about a month or so, but after that, if deGrom's still not healthy, then they're in trouble. And I still think the Braves are going to be a threat in that division, regardless of whether or not they kept Freddie Freeman.
And I tell you, that staff is going to need to be good because that lineup in Philadelphia with the Phillies is.
I was just about to get to them. The Phillies lineup got better. I mean,
Harper,
if things really go poorly for the Mets, don't be surprised if that team finishes in second over them.
I think it's certainly possible. I mean, the Mets were a 500 team last year, and I couldn't believe that their over-under was 90 this year. And maybe that's going to change just before the season starts now with deGrom being out. But you have to understand the Phillies are going to slug their way to wins. If that whole lineup is healthy, Harper and Schwarber are both going to hit 40 home runs this year. Schwarber hit 31 in just 113 games last season. You look at him in that ballpark at PNC Park. I mean, he's going to be destroying baseballs. It's going to be scary. They're going to be winning games.
Ballpark's a bandbox too.
Yes, that I mean, my goodness, it's crazy. Their pitching staff suspect, their defense also suspect. They'll be winning games 10-9 every night, but that'll be exciting. The Mets. See, here's the thing: the Phillies will win games 10-9. The Mets are going to have to win games like they've done in the past, like 2-1, 3-2, or something like that. Because you look at the lineup the Mets have. I think they're given is Alonso. McNeil needs to bounce back. Lindor had an okay first year. I think a lot of people were disappointed, but I would say he had an okay first year. Escobar is not bad at third base. Starling Marte, another guy they brought in. He's 33 years old. So, and he has already had an oblique issue in spring training. So that scares me a little bit. Mark Canha is not an everyday player. Dom Smith I like, but they're trying to find him spots. And I really don't know what you can expect from Robinson Cano this season as well. After the second suspension, being out of baseball for over a year, it's they've got a lot of ifs too. I think they'll be in games. I think they'll be better than 500, but I'm nowhere near the 90 that the over/under had him on, and I'm also not anywhere near where a lot of people had him on top of this division because the Braves are still very good, and now they've got Matt Olson there at first base. Their bullpen is still very good, even though it took a hit with Luke Jackson. And the Phillies are still going to compete. And, the Marlins and the Nationals will, of course, give the Mets fits as well.
forget the fact that the over-under was 90. The fact that they had the fourth highest odds to win the World Series by Vegas, I also thought that was kind of ridiculous as well.
Well, they were a 500 team last year. I mean,
that's what I'm saying.
That's the thing. You know, we were talking about them being in first place until July, but they were still hovering a little over 500 before that. That was the NL East was not a great division last year outside of the Braves. So that's the thing. I don't know how you can tell me that Max Scherzer and Chris Bassett and Eduardo Escobar and Mark Canha and Starling Marte make the Mets a 90-win team this year. It's just, I mean, Buck Showalter, could Buck Showalter give the Mets a few more wins? Yes, but at the end of the day, it also comes down to your production from the lineup and from the roster, from the starting pitching to the lineup to the bullpen. So I think they will be better than 500. I don't think they're winning the NL East, and I'll say this tomorrow. I still think the Braves are better, and I'm sorry, I know the Phillies bullpen. I mean, the Phillies starting pitching and the defense is scarier, but that lineup is so dangerous in Philadelphia. Whether it's, I mean, these four names: Harper, if they're all healthy, Harper, Real Muto, Schwarber, and Castellanos are better than anybody on the Mets.
Don't forget Rhys Hoskins. He's another good name.
Rhys Hoskins too. Yeah, I didn't even think about Rhys Hoskins. It's scary. Those five right there, I'd be worried to pitch to. And you talk about that Citizens Bank Park in Philadelphia. I mean, that's dangerous. I mean, like I said, 113 games for Schwarber last year, and he hit 31 home runs. Just think what he's going to do. Just think what he's going to do if he plays a full season. Now he can DH there in the National League thanks to the universal DH. That's dangerous. That's scary.
Yeah. But
I will say this. I like that we're talking baseball. I like that we're talking about on-the-field baseball because after opening day, I feel like we're going to, morph back into reality and like, oh, we're seeing some problems already with baseball. And it's like, here we go again. But I like that we're talking about this. I like the fact that we're going to have our baseball preview show tomorrow. We'll give you a time definitely, but keep it locked into our social media accounts, and we will definitely give you an impact on that, where we'll go in depth with the Yankees, the Mets, baseball, all these things, how the lockout affects them. So definitely an exciting time for sure. But Hank, if we got a little bit more time here, I want to spend it here on real quick. We've got a couple of quick football notes here, and a Tiger note at the end. But how about this that broke out of nowhere? Bruce Arians going to the Bucs front office, Todd Bowles to take over as the head coach. They think immediately about Brady coming back and if he had something to do with this. But, Arians was up there in age, and I actually feel happy for Todd Bowles because now he gets another shot with a very good roster. A lot of people want to, especially my Jet friends, want to bring up his tenure with the Jets. His first year was very good, and then it went downhill from there. But you know what? But I will say that, But I will say this: Todd Bowles now walks into a team that's got talent. He's got a Hall of Fame quarterback, and he walks into a division that's very favorable. Like I said, Brady could play at half the rate that he's played before, and Tampa could win 11 or 12 games this year. So I like the fact that Todd Bowles gets another opportunity here, and I think he's got a good squad to take that chance on. But I'm kind of nuts. I am surprised about the timing of it, but Bruce Arians can't coach forever, so very interesting thing here.
Yeah, it was something I would have thought would have happened at the end of the season. The other thing that I kind of thought was I thought Byron Leftwich was going to be the one that was going to get the job because he was talked about a lot as a possible head coaching candidate, and a lot of people, Arians himself, credited Leftwich for helping the Buccaneers during their Super Bowl run. So I thought maybe he would get his time. But that being said, Todd Bowles has experience as a head coach. I know his tenure with the Jets didn't really end on a high note. Well, actually, that's being too kind, if anything. But he makes sense to replace because obviously he has the experience and he's been around the block before as a head coach. And now you're giving him a much better roster. So I think this is a chance to see if he really is head coaching material for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And as far as Arians goes, I don't really know if that had as much to do with Tom Brady so much as it's him getting up there in years probably having enough of the stress of being a head coach. But in any event, he's still involved in the Buccaneers. Like if Tom Brady were involved, he would have been gone completely.
Oh, Brady's a player coach as well. It's he's going to have some input on this as well. But yeah,
Well,
I don't.
Maybe some, but again, who knows? It's not like we're flies on the wall.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I like this for Bowles, and you make a good point about Leftwich, and I really thought Leftwich was going to get a head coaching job. I thought the Jaguars actually seemed like a perfect fit for him, but I think Bowles is in a good spot here. He's coached this team defensively before, and they've been pretty good for the most part. Obviously, we know their run the last couple of years, so he pretty much knows this roster. You see these guys starting to come back. I mean, they still have a lot of spots they've got to fill, but one of the things, like I've said, that I think benefits Bowles is the fact that he's in a very favorable division because the Saints are not that great. The Panthers are still a mess, and the Falcons are pretty much rebuilding after losing Matt Ryan. So I think by accident you go 5-1 in that division. Now your AFC challenges are going to be the test this year, but like I said, because of how the NFC is shaped out, I think the Bucs are going to be fine. I think they'll make it back. But this almost segues into what I used an ETB Sports Minute on this. And as much as like people like myself, and I made the Bucs the favorite to get out of the NFC, the Rams said not so fast. The defending Super Bowl champions, they signed Bobby Wagner, 5 years, $50 million, could be 65. When I saw that post, the first thing I thought of, Hank, was, oh my gosh, because this is a team already. We obviously know they are poised to go repeat. They've already had a great defensive team, whether it was Aaron Donald or Jalen Ramsey, and now you've had Bobby Wagner to this mix. And I was like, oh boy, not so fast for the Bucs, because here come the Rams again. They locked up Stafford for 4 more years. Now I think that the Rams are going to be poised to repeat out of the NFC, especially out of the NFC West, and this whole conference, like we said, which is not that great in total. So Wagner going back, it almost makes me swing the pendulum back to the Rams side that they get Wagner. And now there are a few concerns with the Bucs head coach with Bowles because of his time with the Jets. So kind of to me now swings the pendulum back to the Rams being the favorite in the NFC.
Well, yeah, not to mention he's a defensive-minded coach, and that was one of the many criticisms he had when he was with the New York Jets. So I can definitely see that being a factor. But with that being said, the Rams, even with losing Von Miller, you get Bobby Wagner, you're still just as stacked as you were the year before. You just signed Matthew Stafford. I wouldn't be surprised if they run it back, but then again, at the same time, it's really hard to repeat in the NFL. So that doesn't mean I don't really see the Buccaneers as a factor. I tend to agree with you that they're still probably one of the bigger winners of the offseason, if anything, just for the sheer fact that Tom Brady is coming out of retirement. Well, quote unquote retirement, because it's only 3 days.
Is his sabbatical. That's what we'll say it was.
Well, no, his retirement lasted like less than half the time that it took for the MLB to end the lockout.
Oh, no, the MLB was 99 days and and Brady's retirement was 39.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, but I always thought the Bucs are the big winners because look at how much the NFC had lost, whether it was we talked about Devontae Adams going to the Raiders, and how loaded now the AFC is. And, when I brought this up with Nick a couple of weeks ago on the show, of all the AFC quarterbacks now, the 15 or 16 quarterbacks in the AFC, you have 2/3 of them that are at least Pro Bowl material, the Pro Bowl quarterback material caliber. And not every one of them is going to be able to make the playoffs. So they're going to cancel each other out at this point. So that's why I think there's going to be a surprise team in the NFC, but at the same time, that fourth team that makes the playoffs in the NFC, it's not crazy to think they might be 500. That's how bad it is. I mean, they're going to be canceling each other out, and so you're looking at maybe like an 8 or a 9 win team being in that fourth spot, and that could open up some positions for 5 through 7 to get in as a major surprise. Like I said, this Hank, I know we're both Giant fans.
Mm-hmm.
Giants could actually get to 6 wins this year just because of how bad the NFC is, and they might be able to beat some teams along the way.
Yes, I agree with that.
That's what's crazy. That I think the Giants are going to improve to a 5 or 6 win team just because of how weak the NFC is as a whole. Outside of, like we said, the Rams, the Bucks, the Packers, I'll still give there. But even that NFC East, you know what? I don't necessarily believe that the Cowboys are a lock to win that NFC East. I think the Eagles could make a run. I don't think the Commanders or the Giants are up there, but I think they will give them fits. So it's definitely going to create for a wide open thing. But yeah, I think we're shaping up to have another Ram Buck NFC clash. But yeah, no, so the AFC, which has at least 10 Pro Bowl caliber quarterbacks, some of them are not going to get in to the playoffs next year just because, obviously only 7 can make it. But yeah, it's going to be quite the ride here. The draft is only a few weeks away, and now you've got that big trade between the Saints and the Eagles, where the Eagles now have 2 first-round picks now as well. Or is it I don't even know myself. It's the Eagles and the Saints that both made that trade, but you've got another 2 first-rounders there. So it's definitely going to be quite a ride. And, the draft is going to be fun because now you have, 7 teams that have multiple first-round picks, including our Giants.
Giants, yep.
Giants have 2. It's not crazy to think that maybe they see what just happened there and maybe they might trade one of them down. I don't think they're going to, and I don't think they should. But
it wouldn't surprise me if they did, especially if that draft pick is used next year to select their future quarterback. But with that being said, I don't know if it's going to happen.
Yeah, they heard that the 2023 class of quarterbacks is better than this one, so they could look at that. But the tricky thing is too, if Jones gives them a good year, they might feel comfortable enough to keep him going forward. So that's the tricky thing. So if I was the Giants, I would not trade that pick unless somebody they were targeting. Unless there's a reach and somebody jumps up above them to take one of the guys they were looking at, then maybe we could talk about that. But I also don't think that's going to happen. But you know what? This offseason has been insane. Would it surprise me if we see another wild push before the draft? No, not free agent wise, but maybe draft trade wise. It would definitely create a lot of interesting talk heading into the draft, which is just over 3 weeks away. But Hank, just to wrap up the show here, this week, not only do we have baseball, not only did we have the NCAA tournament wrap up, not only do we have baseball coming up, but we also have another big event happening this week. It's Masters Week. Yes, folks, golf is the big one, and the big story is Tiger Woods. He took the course on Monday and playing the front 9, and the big deal is, will he or won't he? He said he's a game time decision. Now, Tiger should have worded that tweet a little bit better and said tee time decision. Obviously, that would have.
I love that.
I mean, that would have sounded a little bit better. But look, I'll give Tiger the benefit of that. He's been through a lot the last 400 or so days. Hank, I think it's an awesome story, regardless, to see him out on the course. On Monday, I saw him. He was on the front 9, I believe it was. I just don't know, and obviously we don't know how he's feeling, but you can't take the cart out, and to compete for at least 2 days like this, walking that course, possibly 4 if you get out of the first round of cuts. I think it would be awesome to see him out there, but I just don't see him being in the Masters this year. But I mean, the fact that he's considering it and that he was out there on the course on Monday. Look, I don't think there's a dominant golfer right now on the tour, but I do watch some of the events, and I will say that I feel like the tour has a lot of very, very good young talent. So I feel like it's in good hands, but you have Tiger out there on the course, and it takes this to a whole new level. But I just don't see him. I just don't see, because, you have to walk that whole course. You can't take a cart like you do in some of those non-major events. So I would love to see it. I'd love to see him be all right and get through this, but I just don't see him teeing off on Sunday. On Thursday.
Yeah, no, I feel like he's still recovering from that horrible injury he had in the accident. It'd be really hard for someone like him to make that walk. But If he did, I mean, hey, pretty cool, but I don't know if I see it either. That sounds pretty hard.
Yeah, but it's the first major of the year. The Masters, for us sports fans, we think of it as like really spring being here now with that. And then you've got basketball starting to wind down, just a few games left there. You've got hockey starting to come down the home stretch. So what it does is it definitely, leads into another great time for sports. And look, Tiger playing in it, if he's healthy enough to play it, only makes things that much better. It makes the game better. It makes the sports world better. But I don't see him doing this. And I would say this also, if he was going to play, I think he would actually announce already that he would be in. I think, him being on the course on Monday was definitely a good sign. But to do this for 4 days, at least 2, possibly 4, it's a whole different animal. I don't know if you can really prepare yourself for that.
Right.
So we will see, but I think Goff's still in a great spot regardless, because I think there's still a lot of good young players out there on the tour. I think this event is wide open. Obviously, I don't know how Tiger would be not playing in a major event in a few years since his last Masters win. So that's another thing too. And it may not even be, Tiger being out there is about winning. It's just being back out there and the excitement of it. But it definitely, we're talking about it. It's exciting to talk about it. It's exciting to even think about it. I just don't know how realistic it is. That would be my one thing regarding this is this really realistic? And if it was, I think he would have announced already that he is going to tee off on Thursday. But I don't think he's my prediction is that he is not going to play Thursday. But I also think at the same time we may see him back sooner rather than later if all is going well. And that's something that I don't think was ever going to be possible when he got into that serious car accident almost 2 years ago.
There would be an
a little over a
insane
year,
ratings.
400 days, yeah.
There would be an insane ratings boom if he did, though. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, we were talking about ratings. That's what I forgot to mention real quick back in the Open. That Duke North Carolina game, if that game was on CBS, we would have been talking about an all-timer when it comes to ratings. But, the game being on cable, not everybody gets TBS. They probably were out of the bars watching it on Saturday night.
That's where I was.
Like the restaurant. So maybe like the local restaurants and stuff probably did real well. But yeah, from a ratings perspective, I agree. If Tiger's playing in this becomes probably the most watched golf game of golf tournament ever. He draws that kind of attention, and his storyline too, coming back after that serious accident, it certainly does. But
even before he had that accident, he had won his first Masters in 15 years.
It had been a long time. Yeah, I remember watching that, and I remember the people on the course. That was some of the most exciting stuff that I remember watching. If you have a very good, close golf final round, it's worth watching. I know people don't like golf because a lot of times there's not a lot of action. Let me tell you, it's a cool thing. I have to say, nothing like on a Sunday afternoon or into early Sunday evening, watching a major and it's close going down to the end and everything is on the line. It's awesome. I'll tell you this, I'd be watching that before I'd be watching a baseball game Sunday.
Don't know. Okay, whoa. I don't know if I'd agree with you there, but
look, I said this. I'm into opening day. I'm into it more than I was a couple of weeks ago because I said even though opening day baseball was back, I was not excited. I still haven't been excited. I'm excited to talk about it. I'm excited to think about the possibilities that the Mets and Yankees can both be this year. But after that, I'll tell you, Friday, Saturday, Sunday comes along. I'm watching. I'll be going around a bunch of different things. Let's put it this way: baseball won't be the first thing I'm tuning into. That's the thing.
Yeah, no, I see where you're coming from. That's probably the one area where I know you and I will probably have a disagreement, but otherwise,
and that's always then. But I think people have to understand. I know we have to move on from it too, but I think people have to realize how bad that 99-day lockout was, and it's not like you don't get over this right away. And especially when things that came out of this lockout are going to impact the sport for years. Look at the Oakland A's. Look at what do you think? What do you think the Oakland A fans are thinking about today when their payroll is $33 million. And you've got Max Scherzer making $10 million by himself and making $10 million more than the Oakland
Oh my
A's
gosh,
payroll.
they're probably like worried. I don't even know if they're worried about like their team right now. I think they're probably more worried about whether their team's even going to stay in Oakland.
They'll be in Las Vegas in a couple of years.
Yeah.
They've been trying to kick him out of that Coliseum for years now. I think they're going to Vegas. I really do. You know what? That's where the Raiders went. You see now the Golden Knights are there. I wouldn't be surprised if in 5 to 10 years we're starting to talk about a professional basketball team there. The way that gambling is now throughout, you know what? Vegas seems to be a great spot to put a professional sports team, especially with the whole gambling aspect where you think of Vegas, but now you can do it everywhere else. I mean, the Oakland A's situation to me has Las Vegas written all over it. But
yeah,
and they've also said too that one of the reasons why, and a good transition back to this, the good reason why the Masters would do really well ratings wise is golf is actually a pretty well bet game too. And that's crazy to think about, but I had heard something on the radio the other day saying that golf is actually one of the sports that gets bet on a lot. So if Tiger's in it, it only creates that much more interest with the gambling aspect of it. But we'll soon find out. Tiger's supposed to speak, and he said game time, technically tee time decision for the Masters, which tees off on Thursday. But Hank, that just about puts a nice little wrap on your debut show on episode number 4 for us here on Game On. Now, a couple of quick programming notes. Tomorrow we will have a special episode 5 of Game On. It'll be our baseball preview show. We're still working on a time for that, so just keep it locked into our social media accounts on Facebook and Twitter at Game On ETB, at Instagram at GameOn_ETB. We will give you a time on that, but we'll be going over the Mets, the Yankees, all things baseball related. We'll give you our over-unders. I've already gotten a few that I've circled on that I feel like are absolute locks. How will the lockout impact the sport this year and beyond? So we got a bunch of that coming up. So we'll be on there for sure. Hank, is also part of our buddies over at the Review and Preview Sports Network. He will be debuting his show, Hitting for the Cycle. It's normally on Thursday nights, but this week you're going to have it on Friday, right?
Correct.
Yeah, Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern. So check out Hank for that, and check out all of our buddies there. And here we got so many shows that are just starting and have started and are about to come up. I mean, I can't even list them all. I mean, you've got Empty the Bench, you've got Beyond the Bench, you've got our show, obviously, Game On. You've got Inside the Numbers. You've got Keeping It Real. I mean, we've got so much. I mean, and Nick was telling me we are just getting started. So that wraps it up. Hank, thanks so much for joining us. You did great.
Always a pleasure, Johnny.
And officially welcome aboard. And of course, folks, we are presented by Knack Bags. Make sure when you go to checkout, use the code GAME, GAME at checkout, and you'll get a free TSA-approved lock to put on your bag. So for Hank and Indictor, I'm Johnny Montalbano. We'll be back with you for a special episode tomorrow, our baseball preview show here on Game On, and then we'll officially be back for more Game On next Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern here on the Empty the Bench Sports Network.